Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface into depths unknown. I am joined by a very special guest today, Jeremy, creator of dynastydaddy.com. And today we're going to be talking about 3 key rules to win your Dynasty leagues year in and year out. Jeremy has a great site, dynastydaddy.com, that he's created. We're going to talk through some of the work he does on that site, those key rules to win your fantasy league. So let's get right into it. Jeremy, we agreed rule number 1, time the market to make league winning dynasty trades. So talk to us a little bit more how you're going about identifying dynasty trade targets and maybe some tools from your site that you're using in order to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Johnny. I wish you had the scuba gear on in person, but but yeah. So just when it comes to Dynasty, I think it's like a circle, right? And you need to know when certain players have a market, because you can sit there and you can look at all the different trade values you want, but just because they're worth 5,000 points or whatever that means, can you move them for that value? A lot of times you can't. So it's important to understand different phases of the game to know when you can actually say, I have a Brian Robinson, but no one wants him right now. Well, someone might want him week 4 when he has a workload or something like that. So it's all about knowing when to buy players, when to sell players, and when those windows open up.
Yeah. Is that a little bit of a dig at Keep Trade Cut right there?
No. They're one of my partners. I'm very much like them. I just mean in general, like there's a bunch of trade values that people use. My site has a ton, so like I'm not immune to that at all, but it's kind of the currency that people go on. It's people like to treat it like a stock market. And sometimes just because the price is there, you also need to know your league economy and know that, can I go out there and actually get that price in my league? If not, then it's like, do I hold? Do I believe the price is wrong? It's at the end of the day, there's not always a buyer.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. What are some of the resources from your site that you're leveraging or seeing people leverage most often when they go about thinking about trades?
Yeah, no, we can jump to the site and just walk through some stuff. I'll load up a demo, but from a high level, we integrate with 7 different platforms. What I'll do is I'll just load a quick demo. This is one of my leagues. But something that people always tend to use is the power rankings, right? And I think the most important thing of a trade and designing a good trade is it has to make sense for both sides, right? No one is going to just accept a trade. You can't trade Alvin Kamara to a tanking team and expect them to actually want that, because that doesn't really make sense. So you need to understand the motive of another team, and you need to understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? So even if technically you're losing value on a trade, if it fits your roster and your roster construction, that's the move you're going to want to make. And if it doesn't fit the other team's roster construction, then you have to either hope that they don't know what they're doing, or you're probably not going to hear back from them. And that's where you get those trades. You send out those trades and you're like, oh, no one responds to my trades. And it's like, well, they have 4 quarterbacks and you're offering them Geno Smith. Like, they don't really care about that.
It's a personal problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like understanding the league. And that's kind of where, the power rankings is really useful. You can easily sort, different, you're like, okay, like this team, I have 3 quarterbacks. I have a lot of quarterbacks. I have a lot of tight ends. If I want to trade a tight end, I can easily just go, okay, what are some teams that lack quality starting tight ends? This team right here lacks currently, like, all they have is Dalton Schultz. They would potentially be open to meeting me at a fair value for one of my mid tight ends. I don't have an elite one, but I have a couple mids. Kind of following that type of process. I think this tool especially makes it really easy to be able to identify your league very quickly without like scrolling through or having a million tabs open. Just knowing what positions teams are weak at and being able to kind of meet them where they're at.
That's fantastic. I love that it even shows that contender tier. Like these are frauds.
Oh yeah.
Friskies, I mean, like they could be dangerous.
There's contender, frisky, fraud, and then technically it's rebuilder. But if there's only one rebuilder, then it's trust the process. So this team is below a lot of other ones.
Yeah, that other one you just showed with no tight end and only Sam Darnold at quarterback, you might be being nice to him, consider or calling him even a fraud, right? Like, I think there's a whole lot of trusting the process to do there with someone like Ben Sinnott still burning a hole in your roster, man. He was a tough one because like I bet you a year ago that number was way different, and just after not doing anything for a year, that guy needs help in a lot of areas. So
yeah, I can pull it up here real quick, but I mean, I do think in general, like Sanat is like kind of like one of those fool's gold tight ends. If we look at all time, right? I mean, because like the realistic option here is like he's probably not going to ever be that good. He had to be an outlier out of the gate to be a fantasy relevant tight end. And for me, there's very few positions. Like there's some positions where I'm like, okay, I'll take a dart throw on, but it usually has to be like a Brock Bowers type where it's a guaranteed first round tight end, like or like a Laporta where it's early second in a great landing spot where you feel confident taking those guys. When it's when they don't have that high draft capital, especially since tight end is a devalued position in most leagues, unless if you have a crazy tight end premium or you start 2 tight ends or something like that. I'm not quick to jump on the Ben Sinnott trains or whatever. Like that's just not a player I'm super invested in. Just because I know tight ends can be weird. They can also hit late. Like I want a player, if I'm spending a pick, I want the player to be someone that I can count on in some sort of role. But even Sinnott, you have like, this is keep trade cut. If we use different fantasy markets as well, there's a bunch of, but he's still around kind of like a third in value, but or like a late second, but I doubt you're going to get that. Yeah. Because everyone's going to sit there and be like, okay, like what is his actual production? And it's like 0.17. Like he averaged what, 3 points a game. And that's just because he caught a touchdown one week. So I'm not the biggest believer in like, no one's going to really go out and say, yes, I'm going to meet you at that fair value when you could go out and buy like a Jonnu for the same price.
Yeah, this is awesome. Show me, I got to understand a little bit more. Pull up that trade bubble chart if you don't mind, because I just think that's got to be one of the more popular tools on the site, I would imagine.
Yes, it's definitely one of the more popular, especially with we'll get meta here with like the content machine, all the content creation shows. It's easy to kind of search trades, talk about things, talk through things. So I know it's popular.
Are you using this how are you using it to spot like players that you are being, that the market there seems to be a lot of discourse on? Are you able to use this to spot trade targets? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important part is like not even necessarily the search. Like the search is cool. Like sometimes if I'm really trying to hone in on one player or something I want, I'll be like, okay, like what, like if I have Jaden Reed, I'm like, what do I do with Jaden Reed? Like, what are people giving me for Jaden Reed? Sure. Like I can go in here and be like, okay, like, I mean, if I want to wait in Jaden Reed for Garrett Wilson, I'll take that any day. But like I can go in here and kind of brainstorm some ideas. But I think at a high level, if I have no idea where to start from the trade market, this is probably the most important thing out there, more than trade values, more than anything like that. Because if you know a player is being moved, there's some sort of market and someone in your league probably has an opinion on them. It might not be the same as the value in that league or like on Keep Trade Cut or other sources, but it does mean that there's some interest.
So scroll down again for me. Those accepted trades, or these are all have been accepted. Is that the case here?
Yes. Every one of these trades have been accepted.
Look at this. I mean, getting Justin Jefferson for Marvin Harrison, Jaden Reed in a second, I thought was one that I saw up there.
Was it up here? Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah, I mean, pretty cool to see the league format that's in. This is very insightful, right? To give you some ideas for who to potentially offer when you're targeting certain players. So I really like
and
this.
you can hone in, filter all the settings if you only want to look in certain tight end premiums or whatever. If you're also logged into your league, you can use your own league settings, and it will just filter to only that.
Wow, very cool. Let's click on Brees Hall for a second, since he's kind of the soup du jour of the week. Is he someone, like, just kind of curious here, is he someone you would target right now, or is he someone that you see someone getting that much trade activity and that's almost a red flag for you in terms of, like, maybe the market's trying to overcorrect right now?
Well, to me, it's hard. Like volatility and or volume only tells me one thing. It tells me that the price is either going to go up or going to go down, right? And I think that's kind of where we have to use our thinking and say, okay, do I think it's going to, he's going to go up or down? I think right now he's probably going to go down slightly, but I still believe in like the prospect and the profile of Brees Hall. Like, I don't think anything's really changed outside of the Jets may be doing something weird with the Gene T report or him being in some sort of rotation. But also, if he gets traded and they take Gene T, like, he's probably going to go to a place that's like sick. Like, we'll just load up Brees Hall with a significant workload. So I'm not too concerned. And if honestly, like, Braylon Allen is the reason I'm panic selling on Brees Hall for Ramondre Stevenson, you're probably going to be taking the 101 next year.
Yeah, that's a rough trade. Like, not to call anybody out specifically, but yeah, that specific trade's pretty rough, because, like, the Patriots could go get a guy. They've talked about getting a guy in this draft. Stevenson's had fumble issues the past, few years, to the point where he was benched for Antonio Gibson. Yeah, I love that you have the contract data in there as well. Like,
yeah,
that's probably what people would lean on, right?
I think he just has the security blanket of, like, and I think this is like my process with like a player like a Chuba, right? Like, one thing about this draft class is it's loaded with running backs. So like all these guys, like Stevenson profiles, you got to be like, okay, they could be disrupted. But if you have a player like a Stevenson or a Chuba that signed a pretty lucrative long-term deal, and I don't know, like, it's fully guaranteed. I don't know how many years, like, they might have an out like 2 years in, but still, like, they're committed to him. And it's also a team like the Panthers, the Patriots. They have so many holes that, like, it's almost like, why would you take a running back? Maybe you'll take a late one. I could see the Patriots taking like a 4th or 5th round running back, but similar is like kind of in the opposite direction. But like the Vikings have like 4 draft picks, I think.
Yep.
So like, I'm not, like Aaron Jones, I'm not really that nervous about Aaron Jones, or even like a Jordan Mason. Like, I don't think their roles are going to be disrupted in that offense, and it's a high performing offense. So it's something where it's like certain players I would be more scared. Like, I know some people like, like Warren or other players like that. I'm more hesitant about them because they could certainly have competition.
So before we move on from this trades topic, I think this is, to your point, like, one of the single biggest things that you can do to make a big change in the way, if you've inherited a struggling team, or you're not loving what you're looking at from the roster you've constructed, like a trade where you're targeting a potential breakout candidate, or getting a cornerstone asset in exchange for, a large sum of resources from your side. Like, those can be the types of swings you need to make. Can you look back at maybe like one trade you made that kind of turned one of your leagues you're in on its head, for better or for worse?
Yeah. So there was one league, and honestly, when you are developing a site, I'm not always the best at being the most active. That's something I need, like, because it's like, okay, like, should I grind spamming messages out to people or, like working on my site that a bunch of people use. So I usually go with the latter, but there was one league that I kind of fell behind the ball on, and I was a mid-team contender for the first 2 years, I think, where I got third and I got fifth, I think. So I was like, okay, this team's all right, but it's a 12 team start 12. It's a deeper league. I was like, I really just need to load up on anything. And I had Tyreek Hill, and I think I traded Tyreek Hill to the favorite to win the next year, like in the offseason. I traded him. I was like, I'm just going to get off the ride because I don't think my team has the juice to win it all. Of course, Tyreek has this like phenomenal record-breaking season after I trade him. But I get that pick. I trade away a bunch of other players. But I think that trade in individual, like I'm like, oh gosh, I got fleeced there. But then I was able to take that 112 because he won that year. So I was able to take that 112 and like toss in a third and move up a couple spots or something. And I got Brian Thomas Jr. And now I had Brian Thomas Jr. on this team that's much younger. So it's something where it's like, do I want to have $100 that I can't really spend on a team that's not ready to win? Or do I want to have $80 that I can actually spend and actually make my team better? And it's like one of those deals where it's like, I did lose value. I definitely had to eat crow for a little bit because Tyreek Hill was ripping off 30-point games every week. And sure, I could have maybe gotten fourth again. But having that one retool year, I did barely miss the playoffs, but having that one retool year, I was able to come back, and in a deep league, I was able to scoop up, like I scooped up Neighbors, Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., and Bowers. I just loaded up on like all those middle picks, and like so far, obviously last year was an incredible draft.
Yeah.
But so far, I've gotten pretty lucky with how all of those players have hit. And then I got some other ones that, still wait and see, a Keon Coleman and right. such, but again, like in a deep league, when you start in 12 and bye weeks come around, like you just throw in a Keon Coleman. You're like, I hope he works. I think I also got Tracy in that league as well.
Nice. Tracy was a great sleeper last year.
Yeah, just like those late round running backs are amazing. Yeah, this is the team.
Yeah.
And like now it's like, my team is pretty solid.
Okay, this is the team you rebuilt. Yeah, it's got all those guys. You said it did, so you weren't full of crap.
Yes, no, I did do it.
Yeah, I love it. Only one tight end. It's all you need, right?
Well, yeah, it's 12 team, and you start one tight end, and I'm like, there's no need. Like, why would I, especially in the offseason, why would I roster a tight end? Like, there's only 12 you start. I have the best one, so I don't need to waste a roster spot. I honestly need to get rid of some of these wide receivers. That's what I would tell myself. So I have too many wide receivers. I need more running backs.
We got a shit ton of picks too for 2025. 3 first rounders, and I think like just on Tracy for a second, it's an interesting topic about. You mentioned like you got to know your leagues, right? Like, and that's something. Whether it's like greasing up your league mates over a beer, if they're people you know in person or something, figuring out who they like, who they're high on. In one league I was in, I got this guy off waivers at the end of the draft because he went undrafted, and
that's crazy.
I knew like it was a 4-round draft and it was actually single freaking QB, and somehow people were still passing on him. I can't remember who they would have taken at the end of the 4th. And I only had one draft pick, and it was in the 3rd. And I'm like, I'm not going to go for him in the 3rd. I know he's going to slip to the 4th in this league, and I think he's going to go undrafted, and then went to go get him. But in another league I was in, a little bit more astute players, and I knew I had to go get him in the 3rd round, even though it was a super flex. And so it just shows you like, in my perspective, not all leagues are created equal, and you can be. I was very high on Tyrone Tracy, but you have to know your leagues and know, okay, I think I could get him off waivers in this league versus, nah, I got to pay the piper here. I got to get him in the middle of the 3rd, or else I'm going to miss the boat on him. So that's my story for Tracy specifically. I've got him in 2 leagues. One off waivers and the other middle of the 3rd. And Now he's someone I'm kind of looking to sell, right? Because he had good rookie year, but had some fumbling issues. There were some reports coming out just recently that they could be targeting a running back, and they're doing a lot of homework on running backs in New York. We'll see what ends up happening there. But I think it's also important to know the quality of the draft class that you're going like last year was just historic in terms of like blue chip prospects in the early first rounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this year it's a little different where it's like guys, running backs that are going in the fourth round could have been last year's Jonathan Brooks. You know, if they were going in that same draft last year, they could have been a second or third round pick. So I say that because I think there will be running backs that go in the fourth, fifth, sixth round that would be higher draft picks in other draft classes. So for me, the biggest league changing trade I ever made was single quarterback league, and I traded Lamar Jackson because I had Patrick Mahomes too. I traded Lamar Jackson and Cooper Kupp right after like his awesome year, Triple Crown year. Traded them for the 101 and the 201. And I got a lot of shit for it. People were like, you don't even know. Yeah, I knew I was going to take Bijan with 101, but they're like, you gave up a lot, you know? And honestly, in hindsight, like the Lamar, I should have probably traded Mahomes instead of Lamar, but this was when Lamar was missing games with injury. But I mean, coming out of it a year later, like Bijan Robinson is the best asset from that trade by far, right? In Dynasty.
Yeah.
And then I also used that 201, and I think I had the 107 that year and bundled those to move up to the 102. So I ended up getting Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs that year. And I won my league this last year in that league. And just crazy because you're like, man, I certainly wasn't going to be competing with just Cooper Kupp as my cornerstone asset in a 1 QB league. So you got to swing for the fences. I love that you had so many rookie picks on that league you just showed. And I think that just shows you need to value rookie picks. Like, and if you're in a league that you think isn't properly valuing rookie picks, then go get rookie picks. You know, if you're in a league that's not properly valuing veterans, then go target veterans for the low cost. So really enjoyed that conversation around, you know, how to make trade targets, how to analyze those, how you can use your site. Before we move on to the next rule, I am just curious. Let's talk a little bit more about like the time to sell wide receivers and running backs, because I think that is an interesting conversation I've seen popping around. There was one of these popular websites was saying like, hey, I think the best age to get rid of a wide receiver is 28 years old. And I kind of agree with it because the sentiment was, you know, AJ Brown is 28. You're going to get a haul right now if you try and trade AJ Brown, but in 2 or 3 years, you won't get that same haul. So what do you think about that age of like, you know, dumping a wide receiver to try and retool? Do you think 28 is a good age to target? Does it depend based on your construction? What are your thoughts on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it depends. I mean, that's like a cop-out answer, but to me, it depends on more factors than just age, right? Like, I think if you have an example of like Tyreek Hill held his value pretty high for, you know, until he was like 30, and he's still, I think he's probably undervalued now, but he's still someone that has significant value. So at the end of the day, like, I think it comes down to, I always say it's like, I have the idea of like, if a player tears like their ACL, how will the market react? Right? And to me is like, okay, if a player like has a terrible injury, will people still want them? Right? Like Rashid Rice, he has a terrible injury, has all this stuff with like driving and all that stuff. So no one really knows what's going on with him, but people still want him and he's still holding his value. So it's literally like, he's still worth like a mid first if you look at like the markets. So for me, I'm like, okay, that's a pretty safe asset to hold on my team. Whereas if I look at like an older player, like a Diggs, when he got injured, his value really plummeted. And it's because he's older. People have more doubts around that. So for me, with someone like an AJ Brown, I would say AJ Brown is a decent option to move because he still has that elite price point, right? When you have that centerpiece price point, it's like, can I just re-roll into a piece that has maybe longer run there, or I can re-roll, pick up a first and tear down to like a Devontae Adams. That's older, has some value, but it's basically just based on how much they score for me. So to me, like I'm not going to be hard set like, oh, like he's 27, I need to get off of him. It's certainly like an important metric, but it's also like if they're scoring super elite numbers, like I don't think Justin Jefferson when he's 28, I wouldn't be like, oh, I need to get off of him. It's just more of like, okay, like can I get that price for him? And then could I also get a player that I think is in a similar range while picking up some additional, value with it. For example, I think Nico Collins is someone that I would target if I have any sort of elite wide receiver, because I feel like he's very undervalued for what we saw the first half of the season. He was wide receiver 1 and everyone's like, oh, like he's made it. And now people kind of forgot about that, but I'm like, I know it's there and he's still somewhat young. So if it's like, okay, can I take an AJ Brown and get Nico plus something, whether it's just a random running back or, like an older can I get James Conner or get something like that? I'm easily going to, try to pivot, make those types of deals.
I love the ACL test. That's a fun one. I'm gonna have to take that back as a takeaway from our show today. Like, will they still love this guy if his knee blows out, right? And if they're younger, you kind of can feel more confident about that, right? Like someone like a Breece Hall's a good example. He was so young when it happened that his value dipped a bit, but then he almost becomes a target. And I think a lot of people didn't want to give him up because they knew this guy's young enough, he's going to bounce back. But once Breece Hall's 26, 27, and you start thinking, well, what if he did it again? Then it's kind of like, the market you might want to cash out while he is healthy, right? And so this leads me to running backs, and I think that's a bit more of an interesting conversation because you've got a guy like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, those two guys, and right where it's like, you want to say they're past the age apex, but you'd be a fool to give up, what the market is willing to pay for them in most circumstances relative to what their production is and the league winning upside they offer fantasy managers. So my perspective has kind of been like with an Alvin Kamara, with a Saquon, with a Derrick Henry, and almost even a James Conner at this point. It's like James Conner and Kamara, like they may be worth like an early second, late first, right? And I'm like, is that worth it? And at this point, I'm like, just till the wheels fall off. Like I'm just going to keep them. What's your perspective on running backs?
Yeah, I mean, I think running backs are more like, for me, I'd like to kind of go with more of a what's it called? Breadth approach. Like, can I get a bunch of cheaper guys? Like if you look at like on my site, I have a war tool for wins against replacement, and it kind of tells you the value of each individual player based on their positional value. But one thing you do see is with running back production, and you can even just do simple like points per game, and you'll see that running backs, it's not always the elite dynasty guys that are at the top. Right. There will be a Derrick Henry. There will be, like a James Conner and things like that. And that's why for me, I'm like, can I just get guys that have a role somewhere or one injury away from a role? And I can probably build out a decent running back room. And then if I can afford it or somehow find that hero RB, obviously you want that, but you can also just stumble upon, single season RBs that do incredible. I mean, James Conner, Alvin Kamara, every year, everyone's like, Alvin Kamara's done. And then he still goes out and gets, 12 targets a game or whatever. And it's like, well, like it looks ugly, but it's still worth 20 points. So, for me, like I do think those guys are kind of like a Diggs where, like if Kamara does go down, it's like, well, like that was fun. Like, but now he's not really worth a ton.
Right.
And there's some players too that have that more elite shine. Like think McCaffrey 2 years ago, think Barkley this year. Like if Barkley gets injured and is out for the year, he's still going to have some sort of significant value. He'll still be valued at like a late first, kind of like, like McCaffrey right now, McCaffrey had that super elite season, had the Achilles stuff. He's still like, you can still go in some leagues and get a late first for him. So like it's all depends. Like, can they put that elite production out there? If they can, they're going to hold their value at least until, it's a couple years away. Like, if McCaffrey doesn't come back and do incredible, then he's kind of down there with that Aaron Jones type, where it's like, maybe he puts together a couple good games.
Yeah, I like it. It sounds like, to recap, your thoughts on it are target production at running back, right? Like, and don't be locked into having, to have cornerstone pieces, because, to your point, like, Alvin Kamara can get 20 ugly points in PPR with 10 catches for 50 yards and 50 rushing yards. And it's the same as, a sexy 120 yard rushing game with a touchdown, right? Like, target that points per game production, and don't get too settled in on what their long-term value is. So, well, great. I love that first segment on how to make league-winning trades to stay competitive. We're going to roll a quick promo, and we will get back with the final 2 keys to win your dynasty leagues.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies, and use your favorite Player Profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
I have been having a lot of fun with those rookie Origins drafts. Let us keep going. The second rule we decided on, key rules to win your dynasty leagues, is the topic of competing versus tanking, right? And a lot of people will say, don't be in that treadmill of mediocrity. You should either be the projected to win, or you should be selling off all your veterans to accumulate dynasty picks. You shared with me, Jeremy, your sentiment is, like, in competitive leagues, in leagues where it's, there's not a huge gap between worst and first. Like, your sentiment is, I want to be competitive every year. I want to give my team a chance to win. So can you talk a little bit more about, that sentiment, and maybe some of the tools you leverage from the website in order to kind of think about how you should be putting yourself in a position to compete every year?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, a big part is, like, obviously sometimes you have to do a rebuild, but ideally in Dynasty, you can always find ways, like, you can gain the Dynasty value, in a sense, to get some sort of production and at least be relevant. The biggest sin that you could have is, like, just not being active, because you're missing all these windows where you have all these players that you could, last year people were selling Cortland Sutton for a first, and that first could become something really good because people are desperate and need to fill their flex, whatever. So, like, that's what you need to be, especially when you're in that middle tier, and just be comfortable too with being a little bit uncomfortable, right? Like, when sometimes you have a super team and it's like, okay, like, you have to be a dummy to mess it up. But other times it's, selling some player that might score a little bit more, but getting that value bump, it can just start snowballing your way. So that's why, too, when I always want to just be in the playoffs in general, because when I'm in the playoffs, variance happens. Like, all you have to do is win like 2-3 games or 2 games, and you're in the money. I mean, you literally, a lot of leagues pay out third place to get their money back. So it's like, even just getting your money back, you're like, okay, cool. Like, that was nothing, like, so for me, I'm like, I can get in the money more often if I'm in the playoffs more often, like, that's just my process. And I don't want to miss the playoffs. If I, sometimes you have to, sometimes you just say retool, but if you're going to do it, you need to be very active. Like, a rebuild should be extremely active, because I don't want to be there multiple years. It needs to be a 1-year thing. Like this is what I'm doing. I'm getting all these picks. I'm doing something like this, and then you should be back in the mix next year.
Yeah, I completely agree. My sentiment is like, if I'm competing, I have no problem trading younger assets or future picks to give myself the absolute best chance to win. So there's one league where for the past 2 years, I got rid of my first 2 years ago. And then last year I got rid of every pick except my first at the trade deadline from teams that knew they were out of the money at that point and accumulated some resources that were going to help me make a push for the championship. Vice versa, there was 2 leagues that I was in where I inherited rosters that I didn't build. I hated them. And I just cut bait. I sold George Kittle, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Watson. I mean, anybody with a pulse, I was looking to move in order to get draft capital. But I think this goes back to what we were talking about like knowing what kind of class is coming. And I did that ahead of the 2024 draft class because I said, look, like I'm happy to lose this year and kind of pay the rake, whatever you call it, because I'm going to come out with Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, and some in a couple quarterbacks, right? Because I needed quarterbacks in that super flex league as well. So I ended up getting like 6 or 7 first rounders, just selling anything with a pulse. And to your point, being extremely active around, oh, this guy had a good week. All right, let's go see if I can get a late or a first for him, or add something on top to get a first. So my sentiment lies somewhere in the middle of what you're saying. Like, yes, I want to compete every year, but sometimes you just have to have a brutal look at, to your point, if you're in a league where the guy's got, this was the league I was in, the guy had like Mahomes and Hurts were his 2 like main quarterbacks, and then like CeeDee Lamb and Jahmyr Gibbs. And it's like, I'm most likely not going to compete with that guy immediately. So I got to get some ammunition to go to war with this guy. Right. So competing versus tanking is a really key rule, like concept, a principle to be competitive year in and year out. You either want to compete and push those chips in, or you want to know when to fold them and rebuild when you've got a weaker roster. Any closing thoughts on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing too is just managing your shots at an elite asset, right? When you have things like a first round pick, even if it's a late first, like first round picks have a much higher rate of actually hitting. So even trading a late first, especially in draft classes like we saw last year, Brian Thomas Jr. was falling to some of these late picks, and you could have traded that, and all of a sudden, like, you actually gave up someone that's now considered an elite asset. So to me, just getting as many shots to actually land an elite player, that's what I want to do. And even if it in the moment it looks like a bad deal, it's like, do I have a shot at getting that elite piece that fits my window, right? You don't want to have that aging elite piece, right? AJ Brown, for example, on a rebuilder doesn't make as much sense. I'd be looking to say, can I re-roll? Can I split it into some picks? Can I tear down somewhere? Like, can I get another shot? Because AJ Brown, by the time my team probably turns it around, AJ Brown probably is not that centerpiece. He can still be a valuable player, like a Devontae Adams type in terms of value, but he's not going to be that centerpiece that, like if all hell breaks loose, I have this valuable centerpiece of my team.
Yeah. That reminds me, I love what you said there about like, do what you can to get a player that's going to, be a lead asset, or even sometimes just if you're a contender, someone who's going to be, you can put in your lineup every week. So I think of a trade, I'm going to see if I can pull it up, that I made last year. And this was right when Mixon went down with the ankle, like after the first few weeks. But you saw that the usage was just elite in Houston. And it's like, okay, he's an older guy. He's like 27 or 28 at the time, right? Like, he's not a cornerstone running back for you. But if I told you I gave up Wan'Dale Robinson, Khalil Shakir, and Jaleel McLaughlin, Keep Trade Cut said I'm losing that trade just to get Mixon in return. But I was never starting Wan'Dale Robinson, Khalil Shakir, Jaleel McLaughlin, right? Like those were three guys that were on my bench every week. And I ended up being able to trade those to a guy who kind of saw that his team wasn't looking too good and was like, man, maybe I should start accumulating some players with some upside. This is a win-win trade. I saw this guy he wanted more depth. He wanted more shots at an elite asset, and I wanted an actual elite asset, right? So I love that sentiment. Okay, so let us close it out with the third key rule, the key principle to win your dynasty leagues. This has got to be the most fun one, and I think the one that everyone already knows, but it just goes without saying, like, do your homework on the rookies, right? Find those sleepers, find those players that can be studs. We just talked about Tyrone Tracy earlier. Getting him at the back end of drafts made a difference. Sam Laporta was a guy I was crazy high on relative to cost. I had him like equal to Kincaid in my evaluation. And I started realizing this is a guy I can get at the early third, late second in most drafts. So I'm going to prioritize getting as much of him as I can, as opposed to trying to move up in the first for someone like a Kincaid. So talk to me a little bit about any advice you have for dynasty managers on, what goes into the rookie evaluations and any tools that you have from your site that help you and fantasy managers in that effort.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a big one for me is always to understand at a high level the strengths of the draft class, and also understand how to play certain ranges, right? So like we'll always have elite assets in every single draft class. They'll just be in different spots, right? This year we have a lot of running backs. Last year we had high-end quarterbacks. We had 2 high-end wide receivers. We always have those shiny pieces. So the ways I usually like to use it is, like, obviously if you get those first, try to just take one of those best players you can. It's important to understand your league format as well, because like you shouldn't be using a first round pick on a quarterback or a tight end, for example, if your league doesn't really value tight end that much. Like you're instantly lighting that pick on fire, when it's like it'd probably be way better to take, like a Xavier Worthy type wide receiver, or like a Matthew Golden this year, over like reaching on Warren if the value just isn't there from your league. So it's important to understand your league. But for me too, I think once you get to those later rounds, it's not as much like, I try not to have as many sleepers as much as just understand how to realize my picks in a way that fits my roster. When I'm doing, when I have to start a lineup, I'm only going to really be looking at, can I get like players that make sense that I can see actually starting. And especially once you get landing spots, you're going to be confident with, okay, this quarterback's in a decent spot, I'm going to take him. This running back is a decent spot, I'm going to take him. Even if the profile isn't great, his RAS score isn't great, whatever, we see backup quarterbacks and backup running backs have a easy way to get starting time. And when they do, we can project their volume, which at the end of the day, when when it's week 12 and you have to start a guy, it's like, I'm much more confident starting, Zach Chardonnay than, like a, Wicks or something like that. I want to be starting the guy that's going to get the ball 20 times if he's a starter.
Right. Right. So it sounds like your big sentiment there is like landing spot and draft capital does matter, and it matters a lot when you're going into those drafts. I'm not in any leagues where the dynasty rookie draft is before the NFL draft, and I couldn't imagine being in one, to be honest. Like, because it's just, you can like a player till you're blue in the face, and if they get, the landing spot is just miserable. Like, you like Will Shipley last year, cool story, but he's going to be behind Saquon Barkley for the foreseeable future, and like, yeah, he's got maybe some contingent upside, but that's about it, right? So, close us out, man. Give us it wouldn't be a fantasy football show if we didn't talk about at least one. Well, it wouldn't be a dynasty fantasy football show if we didn't talk about one rookie from this draft class. So, who is your favorite rookie from the 2025 class and why?
I don't want to give a cop-out answer. I think I'll know more with landing spots, but I think one of my favorite things is trading back in like the first, barely, right? Just do a tiny trade back. And I think Hampton's looking like he's probably going to be the 102, probably going to get first-round draft capital. But everyone treats him like he's in a different tier. So if I have the 101, I am trading the 101 for the 102 in almost every league I could. Literally, and it's not just like I think Hampton's better. I don't necessarily think Hampton's better, but it's the same thing as like last year with it's like Marv and Neighbors. They were in different tiers, but now everyone would take Neighbors over Marv. It's not right. It's not hard for that to change. Same with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. Everyone would take Jaden Daniels now. We see that with like CJ Stroud the year before. With CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. A lot of leagues, CJ Stroud was falling to the third quarterback taken. So to me, it's like people don't know as much. And the fact that, historically, RBs that go in the first round have an amazing hit rate. If someone's willing to give me a second, a future first, or whatever, like I'm definitely going to take that just because it's like, cool, I might win and end up having an extra piece plus a player that's actually better based on landing spot or whatever. But to me, like, I think Hampton's probably the best value on the board if I have the 101. Like, it's hard to make the first pick. Like, you got to commit to, I'm putting all this value on this one player.
Yeah, and you could squeeze certainly something out in addition to another top tier prospect by moving back. So, man, I don't know if I could do it like with Ascendanti, like move away from him. But I think to your point, that's sometimes the beauty of Dynasty is like, it's the moves that aren't like fun for you at the moment, but they end up paying dividends, right? Like when I got rid of Lamar Jackson, he's like my favorite player, and Cooper Kupp was like fresh off a triple crown and is like, wasn't fun at the time to trade them for picks that I didn't know who I was going to get, right? But you sometimes you have to make those moves that are in the best interest of you, but maybe not like a ton of fun to think through. Like, oh man, I'm really giving up a potential generational player in Genti. It's like, yeah, because we don't know if he's generational, so you might as well lock in the value that he is. Like right now he's being valued like he is, right? And so much can change in a year. So I love that, man. Let's close it out. Tell the people, where they can find you, how they can support the work you do, anything you want to plug up.
Yeah. Obviously dynasty-daddy.com. It's completely free. Check it out. We do have a Patreon as well. You get ad free, get some additional features. And then also we have our own YouTube channel. So we do a live trade show at 9 Eastern every week on Tuesday. So stop by, ask your trades, and we'll break it all down for you.
Well, Jeremy, you're clearly very knowledgeable. Had a lot of fun talking through some of the work you're doing with your website, some of the key concepts that you have around Dynasty Fantasy Football. Guys, if you have any questions for Jeremy and I, comment them. If you like the show, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe, please, so you can keep up to date with all the Dynasty Deep Dive guests I'm going to be having on the show. And shows Jeremy and Dynasty Daddies some love because it is a absolutely great site. Jeremy, thank you for everything you do for fantasy football gamers. And see you guys later. We'll see you.